Thank you all so much for coming tonight. My name is Jennifer Anderson. I teach nonfiction and publishing arts at LC State. I'm also the faculty advisor for Talking River Review, which is our student-run literary journal. And it is such a pleasure to see all of you here for this celebration of Karr Roberts and her work tonight. This reading marks our final one of the semester for our Visiting Writers series, and I'd like to thank my colleagues in the Humanities Division for their generous help with and support of this event, specifically members of the Visiting Writer Committee, Marlo DeLi-Galeano and Louis Sylvester, as well as Kimberly Tolson, Leilani Farrell, our division chair, Amanda Van Lannen, and our student ambassador, Cassie Weston. I'd also like to thank Lynn Johnson and her team here at the library for hosting us in this beautiful space tonight. This event was made possible by a generous contribution from the Rose Hill Fund, as well as support from an institutional development grant. Karr Roberts has had a full couple of days at LC State, and we're so grateful she was able to visit campus. She visited several of our humanities classes, including literary analysis, where she led a discussion of fact in fiction, as well as the creative nonfiction workshop, where she led an exercise on closing the gap between research and creative writing to immerse readers into the narratives that we write. Additionally, she led a session at the Center for Teaching and Learning on teaching writing and the future of writing careers in AI. It was a great fun for all of us. I'm now going to turn it over to Landry Cash, a creative writing and publishing arts double major at LC State, minoring in Nez Perce language. She is also the vice president of Talking River Review. Landry will introduce this evening's speaker. Following the reading, we will have time for questions. There are copies of Karr Roberts' books for sale at the back of the room. You can see Aiden and Alyssa back there, eager to sell to you. If you want to purchase a book, one of Tara's books, it's cashier only, or check only, please. And I'm sure she's going to be happy to sign one of those for you all afterward. And we also have our most recent issue of Talking River Review for sale at the back of the room. And we can take cards, cash, or check for those purchases. And we brought this issue with us because it features a short piece of fiction that Tara wrote especially for us, and we were so thrilled to have her do so. Okay, Landry, are you ready? All right.
All right, good evening, everyone. My name is Landry Cash, and I thank you all for being here tonight as we celebrate our visiting writer, Karr Roberts, and her award-winning debut novel, Wild and Distant Seas. Published in January 2024, Wild and Distant Seas is a recipient of the 2024 Idaho Book of the Year Award and the Pacific Northwest Book Award. Roberts describes herself as a lifelong Idahoan. She grew up along the Pend Oreille River in the small community of Laclede, Idaho. She currently lives in Moscow, Idaho with her family. Roberts is also a freelance writer and editor, a science writer, and a regular columnist for The Inlander, which is an independent alt weekly based in Spokane, Washington. We are especially glad to welcome her here tonight as a contributor to Talking River Review, Lewis Clark State's very own student-run literary journal, where she wrote a short fiction piece specifically for our latest issue. And having had the opportunity to work with Roberts through Talking River Review, I was so eager to dive into her novel, and it did not disappoint. I believe the term is unputdownable. What struck me the most was how much Roberts loves her characters. It's evident in the way that the women in this story have such big and beautiful personalities. There were moments my sight went beyond the words that were on the page. One moment you're walking alongside these women in the bustling city streets, or gently rocking on the waves in a ship, or watching the grasses of the prairie blurring past a train window. Her prose has the kind of vividness that made me forget her book was even in my hands until I had to turn the page. We travel the world with these women, their stories spanning generations and continents, and Roberts gives them not just a voice, but a world. And in her own words, she knew that this story wouldn't fully be hers unless it came back to Idaho. For those of us in this room who know that feeling of looking at our hills and mountains with wonder, there is something especially rewarding waiting for you in these pages. If you haven't yet had the pleasure of reading it, tonight is a wonderful place to start. Please join me in welcoming Karr Roberts.
Right. Can you hear me? Okay. Thank you so much, Landry, and thank you, Jen, and thank you, everybody. I've had a wonderful time at LC these last couple of days. Lewiston is close to my heart. My dad graduated from Lewiston High School. My grandmother worked at LC a long time ago, and just nothing means more to me as a writer than getting to be in Idaho communities. And I get emotional about it because this is home, and I love to connect with people that are here, and I am honored beyond reason that you read my work and care about it. It was a joy yesterday to work with students. There's so many impressive students. I really loved hearing their work and their ideas and their thoughts. And Landry and many others of you have a great future ahead of you as writers. So thank you all for having me. I've got 3 excellent things to read tonight. I mentioned to Jennifer at dinner, I tend to read at the speed of light, so wave me down if I'm going really fast. I'm going to start with a passage from Wild and Distant Seas from the section that takes place in Idaho. So the quick primer on this book it's very, very loosely tied to Moby Dick. In Moby Dick, there is one woman who has any sort of significant speaking role. She's an innkeeper on the island of Nantucket. She is a slapstick character. She yells and she throws things and she flails around. She's very silly. And I didn't read Moby Dick until I was well into my 30s and was finally forced to so that I could get a master's degree. And kind of fell in love with this character and started exploring her in writing, and it became an entire book. And as Landry quoted, it's for me, I at points was going what am I doing? I'm writing a book about New England when I have spent my entire life in Idaho, and had the chance to bring it back to Moscow in about 1904. Is the passage I'm going to read. The character at that point who's narrating is named Annie. She is a 15-year-old girl, and her mother has brought her out west after living in Europe and landed her in Moscow, Idaho, which was not an impressive place in 1904, and she is furious and has spent the years that they've been living there plotting her escape. And it's not just leave it, it's she wants to do so in dramatic fashion and punish her mother. But has also reluctantly made some friends while she's been in town, including the woman who they rent from. So people tended to board in other people's houses at that time. So she boards with a woman named Mrs. Astor. And I wanted to read something I've never read out loud from this book before. And Mrs. Astor is my favorite character. And so we're gonna meet her. Well, she's already been met, but this is a moment between her and Annie. It's pretty important. So, okay. The other thing you need to know is that, all the characters in my book are slightly magic because I like magic and I'm the writer, and so I have to do that. And Annie's ability is that she can tell where anything or person has been at any point in its history. So, Mrs. Astor had no family that I'd ever seen. She often went out to visit with friends, but the only companion she kept in the house was Magpie, who was a very small dog. She had money, but not too much. Otherwise, she wouldn't have bothered with boarders. Still enough that she could order fancy clothes and stuff her house with leather-bound books and gilded clocks and chairs that were for looking at, not sitting on. A whole wall of her bedroom was hung with hats. Her book collection never had a speck of dust. She was self-assured in a way I'd never seen before. The artist types that Mama and Tia tended to favor always seemed to be performing. My grandfather's editors and journalists always seemed to be competing. Mrs. Astor only went about her business, and she knew more than anyone I'd ever met. She could command respect at any room, discuss any topic from the newspaper, which she read every single word of each morning. She followed the prices of crops and the patterns of weather and business that changed them. She knew how to track down edible plants and mushrooms, even in town. She trimmed her own roses, cleaned her own toilet, hemmed her own dresses, made her own bread. I was pretty sure she could climb up to the roof and patch the shingles if she had to. I needed her to teach me everything I didn't else. I waited for a soggy morning when it was only Mrs. Astor and me in the house. Mama and Tia were shopping. Patience was practicing her piano, and Paula was doing chores. Mrs. Astor read the newspaper on one of her pink velvet sofas, her boots swinging a few inches off the floor. Magpie sprawled beside her. I worked on a map of the university's administration building, a cathedral-like building on the hill, in my latest notebook. I had half a dozen by then stacked under the bed in my room. Some still came in handy for the Saturdays I was astonishing Annie, so she swindles her classmates out of money by telling their futures. Though the act was losing its novelty. Mostly they kept me occupied, kept me focused. Once a week, I practiced the cliffs and fjords of the Faroe Islands, pulled from the descriptions in the encyclopedia and my memories. Can you teach me something practical? I asked Mrs. Astor. If you insist, she said, still looking at the open newspaper. What exactly? I'm not sure. What do you think a person needs to know to get by in the world? Fighting men and wrestling bears. She laughed at herself as she folded the paper and stacked it by the stove. Or making your own food. Ever done that? I could boil an egg on occasion, put together a sandwich. Not really. Perfect place to start in that case. And what would you like to make? Of course, I thought of desserts. All the things Pauline patients bought at shops that I denied myself. What, if anything, would I want to make to enjoy? What might I be able to sell if I had to? I remembered the dinner on the SS I don't speak French, Le Loire, which is a French cruise ship that her family came across. So. How about Charlotte à la Russe? She let out a whoop and started for the kitchen. I am woefully out of Bavarian cream, so we will be making gingerbread. Then we can discuss other things. She clattered around and came up with a pan, shaking her head. Charlotte à la Russe, for Pete's sake, get over here and measure out the flour, if you can manage. I figured it out with a little correction on smoothing the top. Soon I was covered in dusting of ingredients, my hands sticky with molasses. But the pan was full of brown batter going into the oven. And now we clean, Mrs. Astor said, handing me a damp rag. She supervised, standing beside me, said she was too small to look over my shoulder, pointing out spots I'd missed. When I was hot and tired and ready to flop back on the couch, she flung open a cupboard. And now we set the table for supper, she said. Can't we wait till later? I stretched my arms, surprised at how sore I was from stirring. Later has work of its own. She handed me a stack of plates. I can help you learn that rather quickly, at least. If you want to be practical, I can help. You need money, I suppose. I fumbled the dishes, barely managing to keep a grip on them. How had she seen so clearly what I was after? Christian reports you've been running a business of sorts with his sister, she said, straightening the plate I just sat and reaching to pat my arm. Not in so many words exactly, but I know that Bloomquist girl, always looking to make a penny. It was her that convinced me to hire a wagon driver when she wasn't more than 10. Her papa sent her brother, of course, but she's a smart one. It's just a game, I said. And plenty of things pay better than games, though I'm not sure about Charlotte à la Russe. She was never going to give up on that joke, but it was a decent trade for what she offered. I'll learn anything you think might allow me to make a living for myself, wherever I want to go, but please don't tell my mother. I searched for an excuse and landed on a truth. She says she had to work too hard as a girl. I assume telling your mother and aunt was a given, or not telling your mother and aunt was a given. I'm accustomed to keeping secrets. She led me back to the couches, then patted the cushions beside her. What do you know about Mr. Alfred Astor? The question seemed out of the blue. I hadn't thought much about her husband, beyond the fleeting idea that he must have been the source of her money. I suppose he worked for the railroad or the lumber company? Her smile was bright and mischievous. There is no Mr. Alfred Astor. So he's dead? Her grin stretched larger, smoothing out the fine lines of her face. There never has been a Mr. Alfred Astor. Sounds impressive, though, don't you think? I realized then that I never looked at her closely enough. I'd been awed by the bearskin and silk and feathers, the bulletproof charm, but I'd assumed her path was simple. I focused my sense on her, chasing back through the years in the White House. And then something happened that I'd never seen before. The path stopped. Not at her birth or origin, but as I hit an invisible wall and everything beyond it was somewhere distant and soft, somewhere I couldn't follow. She sat, smiling as if she knew what I was doing. What I'm trying to tell you, Miss Sweet, is that if a woman wants a thing of her own in the world, she's got work for it. She sniffed the air and rose. I'd been so intent on her I hadn't noticed how the room had filled with cloves and cinnamon. She'd better be sure it's worth the work. She said. That's Mrs. Astor. Second thing, I'd like to read the short story from Talking River Review. It's really cool to be in this journal. I love that it's a journal run by undergraduates, and I have seen just the incredible love and care that they have for it, and the incredible opportunity it is for all of you to learn from being part of this. Talking in Jennifer's class yesterday, I remember how scary it was to start sending out my work, and I think one of the best parts of reading other people's work is knowing that hopefully wherever you send yours, there is someone just as generous on the other side. And yeah, it was lovely to work with their team. Though I did have to write a short story, which I haven't done in a long time. So I'm glad that it came out what they hoped for. So this is called Neighborhood. Her real name was Amanda or Ashley or something like that. She told us to call her Star, so we did. She saved our lives so many times that summer. She taught us to watch out for blood-sucking brown slugs and to hide in the lilac hedge to avoid getting run over by the high school kid on the corner of the big stupid truck. She found raspberry canes behind one of the rundown houses and explained how sometimes raspberries had little worms that would eat right through your throat if you swallowed them. But you could split the berries in half to check. You had to do it fast or the worms would know what you were up to, and we weren't very good at that, so we gave most of our raspberries to her just to be safe. Star was the oldest of the little kids in the neighborhood, going into 3rd grade when I was going into 2nd. The twins down the street were going into 1st. My sister Tess was starting kindergarten, and our neighbor Josh was so little his mom still sent him out in training pants, so ties. Star moved up with her dad from California, a place we'd never been. She told us she had a swimming pool there and 5 ponies. I still split my raspberries in half, decades after figuring out the worms Star warned us about were never real. I asked Tess once, and she said she does it too, but she doesn't remember why. One day, Star saw me drawing a picture in sidewalk chalk of me and Tess riding a pony. She ran back into her side of our duplex to get a scrap of scratch paper. She even stole a good pencil from her dad's backpack, sharp and not too stubby. "I've got a job for you, Cass," she announced. She led us all over the neighborhood, looking for ghosts that she described for me to draw while the other kids watched. A lonely old man in a top hat, suit, and glasses who peered out of the bell tower in the empty church. A cat slinking through the muck at the bottom of the scummy pond among the apartment blocks. A girl, a 3rd grader like Star, who wandered the school playground, searching and searching for something she'd lost. We'd never noticed the ghosts before. We were glad to know they were there. Tess hung up my drawings in our room so we could remember what they looked like in case we needed to run from them or check on them. We played every game Star wanted. Why would we have done anything else? The only time I couldn't keep up with her wild ideas was when we were getting ready to make a potion in Josh's plastic pool, and she pointed out a dragonfly that had drowned the night before. It was the biggest dragonfly we'd ever seen. She told me to pick it up, so I scooped it out of the water and managed not to scream as its body wilted into my palm. "Throw it before it bites you," shrieked Layla, one of the twins, but I didn't move. "Is it dead?" Josh said, putting his nose against my fingers. "Don't be stupid," Star said. "Dragonflies don't bite people, and it's only sleeping." She looked at me. "Wake it up, Cass." I held it up to my face and saw the soft, pale fuzz at its neck and the lines that veined its spotted wings like shattered glass. I imagined the powdery blue tail flexing and lifting, the legs springing up and pressing into my hand, the eyes shimmering to life in the sunlight. I wanted to wake it up, but I didn't know how. "I can't," I finally said. "I'm not magic." Star shook her head. "Too bad, Cass. You really should try to be." I started drawing dragonflies that night, trying to remember the shape of each tiny scale. In August, Star told us she was going back to California soon to check on her ponies. A few days before school started, she was gone. In October, I asked Tess if she thought Star was ever coming back, and Tess said, "Who?" I found the paper with my ghost drawing squished against the wall behind her bed. I tried to smooth it out, but the tape had ripped up the corners. When I found Tess watching cartoons and tried to show it to her, she said it was nice, fine looking. Kids moved away. I knew I couldn't do anything about it. Josh left a few years later when his folks split up, and the twins were gone by the time I was in junior high, to a better house, by better schools, and a better part of town. I ran into one of them, Isla, when she was in medical school in Chicago, and I was finishing my art degree there. We had lunch. We didn't really know what to say, so we just talked about school, gave updates on our parents and sisters. Years later, when my daughter started 6th grade, I looked at her schedule and found Layla's name as a teacher for 5th period science. I emailed Layla and explained who I was, tried to fill in the years since we were neighbors, and she invited me in to teach a lesson on scientific illustration. I didn't ask her if she was still afraid of dragonflies, but I wanted to. Last year, I was helping my mom sell her old car on Facebook, and she scrolled past a picture of a man that stopped me in my tracks. It was Josh, tall and bearded, with a dark-eyed husband and a perfect petal of a newborn curled between them. It turned out Josh's mom had found mine online years before. "You should have told me," I said to Mom. She shrugged. "I didn't think you remembered him." I remember all of them. I'd look Star up, but where would I start? Search Amanda Ashley Star, California Ponies, Raspberries, Ghosts. Search who was the girl who lived next door the summer I was 7. When I cut back on illustration jobs to work on my own book project a few years ago, I stopped by my mom's place to get some old photos. She found a few I'd never seen, mostly overexposed shots of Tess and me on the first day of school, and Halloween costumes in front of scraggly Christmas trees. None of the neighborhood, none of our friends. I asked her if she knew anything about Star's family, but she said she didn't remember a little girl living on the other side of the duplex when I was that age. I prodded her, tangled brown hair, scraped knees, ideas about everything. I felt like I'd spent every minute of that summer with Star. Gosh, honey, I don't know, she said. You know how much I was working back then. I did, but shouldn't she remember our neighbors? She sighed. It's not like any of us were throwing block parties or anything, she said. I guess there was one guy with a little girl, but I thought that was when Tess was a baby. He wasn't very friendly and the girl was kind of strange. Ran away if I tried to talk to her, you know. Maybe you're thinking of someone from school. I called Tess and she was even less help. She sounds mean, she said. Kids are so weird. I've spent my life as an artist trying to see things like a child, to look closely in the way most adults have forgotten to stick my nose right up to the strangeness of the world, to investigate the between and beyond, to command reality to be more than it appears. I've learned to disintegrate a creature into arc and angle and color and shadow and light, and reconstitute it into an image that's a perfect match to the living thing. I can take you to places you could never go. I can imagine the ghost of a face and make it smile, scowl, listen, watch, look so real on paper that you might wonder if it's someone you knew once long ago. My book comes out this week, a wordless children's book called Neighborhood. For the cover, I drew a background of raspberry canes with a girl with a long lashed eye peering through it and an enormous dragonfly, a 12-spotted skimmer, perched on a leaf, thrumming with the intimation of movement, wide awake, more alive than alive. Have I done it yet, Star? Am I magic yet? Right. Thanks for letting me write a short story. That one, yeah, there's, the raspberry story is true. I had a neighbor as a kid who stole our raspberries by convincing us that they would potentially kill us if we didn't do things right, so that one's friendly. Last thing I'm going to read tonight is a little longer, so that I can take a breather here for a second. I am working on writing a second book, which is scarier than writing a first book, because now I know that I have done it, but have not entirely figured out how. And so I'm doing it all over again with like extra expectations for myself. It is finally to the point where I feel like a little bit of it can see the world. So I'm going to read y'all the first chapter. By the time this book is out in the world, and hopefully it will be out in the world, this might be wildly different. But the story as it stands is my main character is a woman named Charlie. She lived for part of her childhood with her grandmother and great aunt in very rural North Idaho, in a fictionalized version of the town that I grew up in. And things were really weird during her childhood. So she kind of distanced herself from that point in her life. She moves to the coast and kind of has one of those relationships with family where you're like, are you okay? Okay, you're okay. Great, hands off. But she gets a call in the summer of 2023 during a heat wave, and her grandmother's neighbor says, hey, like your grandma is acting a little weird. And he assumes that she is a dutiful granddaughter and says, like, can you tell me if everything's all right? So she gets herself out to this rural part of a town, and while she's there, she kind of starts everything that she's been avoiding for the last 30 years rises to the surface. So she spent a few years as a child traveling as a country music star with her grandmother in the small scale Pacific Northwest way that we have some, little country music stars. And then another portion of the book follows her grandmother and great aunt in the 60s, where the origin of their family's trouble happens, which I will tell you involves an alien artifact, because again, I can put what I want in my books, and so I do. But this is the opening chapter. It is set. This part is set in Sand Point, Idaho, which is the largest town near the town I'm from. So, Charlie is almost 9, way too old to still be sucking her fingers, but she does it anyway, shoving her middle and ring fingers into the squishy spot beneath her tongue and scraping her pointer and pinky along the red, rashy skin of her cheeks. It burns, and for a second, she just thinks about that instead of everything else. Better knock that off when we get inside, says Sal, her great aunt. Watching Charlie in the rearview mirror, she parks the car in front of a squat brick building. Place is full of germs. And folks will want to see your pretty face, says Teeny from the passenger seat. Teeny is Charlie's grandmother, but she's never called her grandma, only Teeny. Everyone calls her Teeny, except for Charlie's dad, who calls her mom, and Aunt Sal, who sometimes calls her Teen or Ernestine because she's Teeny's big sister. Teeny has never told Charlie not to suck her fingers, has never told her not to do anything, really. But Charlie knows Teeny wishes she would knock it off too. This morning, Teeny rubbed the rash with petroleum jelly from a container that looked like it's been in the bathroom cupboard since Charlie's dad was a kid. For a few hours, Charlie's cheeks felt better than they had in weeks, but she digs her fingers in deeper as Aunt Sal opens her car door. Teeny sticks her head in, her fluffy blonde hair still in the door frame. Come on, sweetie. Teeny's never been mad at Charlie before, and this would be a terrible time to change that. Charlie wipes her hand on the knee of her jeans and her buckles. The sign outside the building says, Our Father's Mansion. Charlie hasn't seen very many mansions, but this definitely doesn't look like one. Why would Teeny be going to play piano at someone's mansion anyway? She tries to remember what Teeny called the place on the drive over. A rest something. Rest is a good thing, right? You can find somewhere comfortable to sit while Teeny plays, Aunt Sal says. No laying down, no kicking the wall, no staring at anyone. You want to sing along? Do it nice. And keep your fingers out of your mouth. Teeny leans down to grab Charlie's hand. We'll put some more petroleum jelly on her cheeks when we get home, she says. Charlie wants to say it isn't her home. It's their home. Aunt Sal and Teeny's house way out in the middle of nowhere. So far from everything that it felt like they were driving forever through the woods and along the river to get to whatever place this is. Charlie watched the minutes slip by on the car clock while Teeny was explaining things to her. How Charlie was going to be staying with them for a while. How they get to do all sorts of fun things together. How she'd have to run a few errands with them, like this trip to town and the rest something. But that would be fun, too. I'm going to get some water. But Charlie's still trying to figure out the mansion and what exactly is going to be fun about it when they walk through the front door and she's hit by the smell of Lysol and puke and too many bodies. It's a hospital. This place is a hospital, with fake flowers and stiff chairs, buzzing lights burning over bone white tile, rows of doors and that awful smell. She grips Teeny's hand. I don't like hospitals, she says. She hates them, actually, but adults get upset when she says she hates things. Oh, honey, it's not a hospital, Teeny says. It's a rest home. That makes it sound like somewhere with big marshmallowy pillows and plates of mashed potatoes and turkey. Nice soft things. But everything about this place is hard and cold. Charlie winces at the squeak of wheels as a lady in a pink uniform rolls past them, pushing a bed with a sleeping old woman in it. Charlie thought she's sleeping, at least. It's a hospital. Her feet stopped working. She's only been in one other hospital, 2 weeks ago, when her mom went to the emergency room and left Charlie sitting in the waiting area. Never heard of a nursing home? Aunt Sal says. She doesn't give Charlie time to answer before she starts walking away. Come on, Teen, they're waiting. Good teen. Nursing sounds like nurse, which means hospital. Charlie says put, stays put. Teeny kneels and puts her warm hand on Charlie's back, stretching between her shoulder blades. Coconut shampoo drowns out the hospital smell for a moment. Some people call it a nursing home, some people call it a rest home, but it's just a place where old folks live, that's all, she says, turning Charlie around so she's looking at her. She grins and leans forward so her nose bucks Charlie's. They're my biggest fans. Charlie's stomach feels soupy, just like it did 2 weeks ago when she threw up from the smell in the waiting area where Mom was talking to the doctor. A nurse brought her a wet washcloth for her neck, but it was too cold, so she left it to soak into the chair next to her while she flipped channels on the TV, watching cartoons without any sound and feeling her stomach swish and twist. If you want, you can hold my hand and close your eyes till we get to the music room, Teeny says. I want to go home. Charlie's willing to call it home now if it means they can leave. Teeny sighs and pats Charlie's back again. Aunt Sal is all the way at the end of the hall, but she turns around and marches back toward them. She's frowning, not like she's angry, but like she's tired of waiting. Adults are always looking at Charlie like that. Charlie shuts her eyes and focuses on the sound of Aunt Sal walking, the swish of the tan socks she always wears, the clop of her sneakers against the floor. She doesn't want to make Aunt Sal frown like that. She doesn't want Teeny to sigh and rub her back and worry about her. She doesn't want to make them upset, especially now that she has to stay with them. By the time Aunt Sal is a few feet away, Charlie convinces her feet to start walking again. She keeps her eyes shut and her hand tight in Teeny's until they leave the tile hallway and hit carpet in a room that smells like Christmas trees, even though it's June. Teeny guides Charlie to a love seat against the front wall of the room, right next to a beat-up piano. Charlie tries to study the love seat's pattern of tiny pink roses, but she can't keep from noticing all the people. Old folks, like Teeny said, sitting on other pastel couches and in their wheelchairs with more shuffling in, all of them looking a few seconds away from being the woman in the rolling bed, sleeping or dead. Aunt Sal is over by the door saying hello to everyone like it's no big deal, while Teeny lifts the piano's lid and stretches her fingers, playing the ghost of a song. So it's not a hospital? even if it smells like the one where her mother walked out of the emergency room, stepping like her shoes were made of glass, and kept on walking, leaving Charlie all alone in the waiting area until the nurse called her down. Teeny tried to explain that, too, on the car ride to our father's mansion. She said that Charlie's mom was sick and needed to go be with her own parents, the grandparents out in Massachusetts who Charlie has never met, and that Charlie's dad wasn't ready to be a dad all by himself and he needed to make some money, so he was going over to the coast to get a better job, but he loved her very much. That's why he dropped her off at Aunt Sal and Teeny's house last night, but didn't stay. They'll take good care of you, he said before he left. Good afternoon, ladies and gents, Aunt Sal shouts. She's left the doorway and is standing on the other side of the piano now, holding out her arms. Who's ready for some good old-fashioned tunes? When Teeny hits a low chord with her left hand, Charlie's stomach stops rumbling. When Teeny's right hand dances out a melody, Charlie forgets her thoughts almost as much as she does when she puts her fingers in her mouth. She's heard Teeny play the piano a few times before, when her parents brought her up to Aunt Sal and Teeny's house for quick visits at Christmas or Easter, but this is the first time she realizes she's never seen anyone else play quite like Teeny does. Charlie's music teacher at school played from sheet music taped together so it would fall off the piano, and a lady who babysat her sometimes has a son who practiced scales from a book. But Teeny plays without music in front of her, without needing to look at her hands, without hardly seeming to think. She sings along too, in a big, bright voice that fills up the room. Charlie's always thought Teeny was tall, but while she's performing, she's even taller, her arms and fingers longer. She flashes smiles over her shoulders at the old folks between verses, bouncing right from the fast, happy song to one that's deep and wide, with lyrics about mountains and souls and cities. When Teeny's through her first set of songs, Aunt Sal gets up and asks if anyone would like to make a request. Charlie doesn't recognize any of the names that people shout, but Teeny knows them all, every note and word. Charlie sits up and scoots to the other side of the love seat, closer to the piano. A woman in a yellow dress requests the Tennessee Waltz. Charlie's never heard of that one either, but its swaying beat sparks a memory from one of those quick Christmas trips when she was little. She'd gotten up to get a drink of water late at night, but stopped in the shadows of the hallway when she saw Teeny in the living room, lit up by the moonlight, singing to herself as she twirled. Charlie's always been good at learning songs, and her mind grabbed the words Teeny sang and kept them. She still sings it to herself at night sometimes, like a lullaby. She keeps thinking about that other song as the Tennessee Waltz fades out. She doesn't realize she's talking out loud when she says, "I could sing that one." Teeny looks over at her, tilting her head. "You want to sing something, honey?" Charlie wants to say no. She was just thinking about singing it. But one of the old ladies in the front row starts clapping and everyone joins in, all their attention suddenly on Charlie. "What's going on?" Aunt Sal asks, leaning across the piano. Teeny clasps her hands together. "Charlie wants to sing a song." She does. Charlie's always thought that Teeny and Aunt Sal don't look like sisters, with Teeny's cotton candy puff of curls and colorful dresses, and Aunt Sal's chopped short gray hair and plain blouses and slacks. But she sees now they have matching blue eyes, and they're aimed right at her, waiting. Charlie licks her sticky lips and nods. Teeny beams, and Charlie knows she gave the right answer. Teeny wiggles her fingers and points at the carpet beside the piano. Charlie stands up and shuffles over, squeezing between the corner of the piano and the bench close to Teeny, where she can see her face while she plays. Aunt Sal takes Charlie's place on the left seat. "What do you want to sing?" Teeny whispers. "I can play just about anything." Charlie thinks about picking another song, but she can't seem to remember even one other name, so she blurts out the truth. "I was just thinking about the song you used to sing when I was little, the one about the wolves." Teeny smiles flattens. "Oh, that one. I've never played it here before." She nods toward the piano keys a few times. "But if you want me to, I will." She nods again and takes a slow breath. "Listen careful now. You'll know when it's your cue to start." Charlie twists her fingers into the bottom of her t-shirt. Everyone in the whole room is waiting for her, watching her. Starts to notice the smells again. Cooking meat, more Lysol, something like mint gum mixed with bleach. Spit fills up her mouth. "Here we go, honey," Teeny whispers, then hits the opening chord. Charlie swallows. It's too late to change her mind now. Teeny plays the melody through the end of the chorus, exaggerating the movements of her hands as she slows. Charlie's cue. She knows it, just like Teeny said she would. Charlie swallows again and opens her mouth and somehow starts to sing. She can hear her voice mixing with the piano, high but strong. She tries to sound a little sad. She hits the chorus, the way she remembers Teeny singing the song. I will not attempt to sing for you. Songs really public. "We danced to the moonlight, we danced to the starlight, on that sweet night when you loved me so good. We waltzed to the wolves with their bright, lovely cry, I will love you till I die." She glances up during a break between verses and remembers the people in the room. The old lady who started clapping has her eyes closed with her hand on her heart, and a wrinkled old man in the back is smiling with tears dripping down his cheeks. Charlie knows she's never sung like this before. Not really. Not in a way that makes people listen. As she starts the second verse, she turns her head enough that she can see the love seat. Aunt Sal is sitting on the very edge, her back stiff, her arms tight against her body, her hands floating just above her lap like she's forgotten how to move. Aunt Sal doesn't look toward Charlie, not even once. She's locked on Teeny like she's the only person in the room. Aunt Sal doesn't even blink, but her eyes dart to Teeny's hands as she starts to play the final chorus. I dance to the moonlight, I dance to the starlight. Teeny is so close that Charlie can hear her breathing in through her nose during pauses in the lyrics, like she's singing too. But she isn't. She's not looking at Charlie or over at Sal or at anything. Her face looks like she's asleep. Eyelashes fluttering and lips loose, but she never stops playing, so Charlie keeps on singing. On that sweet night when I left you for good. It's too much for Charlie to think about all at once, but her brain still tries, flickering through the singing and the washing and the being watched. Aunt Sal frozen and Teeny off in space, her mom walking out and her dad driving away. They'll take good care of you. She closes her eyes to the last few lines and remembers being alone in that dark hallway, watching Teeny sway, singing along. Just singing. I waltz to the wolves with their dark, mournful call. Teeny slows down and lets the note for call echo and fade. In the silence, Charlie knows they're all waiting for her to sing the last line to find out how the song ends. Sometimes when she's alone, she doesn't sing that line out loud, but she always thinks about it. I never loved you at all. The old folks cheer and clap as the last chord rings through the room, as Aunt Sal surges back to life, leaping from the love seat and crushing Charlie against the piano as she reaches for Teeny, yanking her hands away from the keys. I'm son. It's kind of fun to read that out loud. It's a little scary because I just don't know what this book is going to be yet, but it feels good to put a part of it out in the world. So thank you for joining me for that. I guess now I'm happy to answer questions. This is the part I'm more confident about. I'm one of the weird writers that's super, super extroverted, so you can ask me anything you like, or we can all stare at each other awkwardly, and whatever is your game. Yes, thank you.
Well, that was a good segue into that. I'm curious about your writing process with this one. Did you start off with the idea of now know the stuff, and then it progresses from there?
Yeah.
You don't know exactly where the characters you're taking you.
Yeah. So with Wild Seas, it surprised me at many turns too. It started out as an assignment for class. I worked at University of Idaho for 12 years, and I finished my master's degree while I was there because I could take classes for super cheap. And I convinced my 19th century novels professor to let me write a short story instead of an essay because I didn't want to write an essay. Because at the time, my kids were in kindergarten and third grade, and I was working full-time and teaching part-time and finishing master's degree. So it sounded like a fun project. And it did start with just Melville because it was for that class. So the first 3 chapters of what became Wild and Distant Seas were a short story that I turned in. But I kind of discovered that I wasn't done with it yet, and I kept working on it all that summer, and I kept going back to it and fiddling with it. And kind of what tipped it over into becoming a novel was 2 things. One, my friend Stacy Bo Miller, who is a poet. If you might have encountered her if you come up to Moscow things, because she was Moscow's poet laureate for a while, read it and said, "Terry, you're writing a novel." And I said, "That's very funny. No, I'm not. I have no time for that. How could I do that?" But then my literary agent reached out to me, which is like winning the lottery in the world of writers, and asked me if I was writing a novel. And I said, "Yeah, sure. This is my novel." And he agreed. And so having that external support of someone who did not know me but seemed to believe I could write a novel was really powerful. And he still was very patient because it took me 3 more years to write it. But yeah, I did spend a lot of time. I would periodically stop and be like, why am I writing a novel about Moby Dick? Where did that come from? Because it was just kind of an accident. I really deeply enjoyed it. I'm trying to remember, one of the students in, I think, Kimberly's class yesterday talked about liking to write about things that they were curious about. And that tends to be how I roll. I like to learn new things in my writing. My day job as a science writer is all about that. So I loved, I had never been on a ship on the open ocean, and I got to write about ships a bunch. And I really love whales, enjoyed that deeply. But it was a little bit different when I started writing this book, and all sorts of different little pieces come from different ideas and moments and things. But it felt a little unmoored at first because I had that anchor with Wildness of Thieves. So that's been part of the challenge of writing a new book is, even though this, ventures wildly far from Melville as quickly as it can, this one has to be all major. Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll go in a row. So Pink, and then Pink next to her, and then Marlo. Okay.
Why does your book neither but it had the Billboard's name?
Oh, okay, so that is a fictional book that the narrator of that story wrote, because she's an illustrator. Part of why I chose that is I really love wordless picture books. There's one called Tuesday that was really famous when I was a kid. It won a big award, and it was one of my favorite books. So when I was creating that character, I decided to make her an artist, but it took me a while to decide what type of artist she was, and decided that, her nostalgia for that time when she was a child might take its form in drawing these places that she remembers. Stuff I made in a wordless picture book. I wish it was real. I have some friends who are picture book authors. I should ask them. All right, and then
They think I have any books that involve the characters who have covered planets and where the characters have sort of celestials.
So, not in the book I'm working on, but I would love to someday. I have written one short story about an alien who comes to Earth, and aliens are one of my favorite things. So I think one of the great challenges of writing a book about outer space is that, you have to come up with all the rules of a distant planet. One of my favorite writers who writes about other planets is named Nadia Corafor, and she just comes up with these wild ideas. Ursula K. Le Guin, who's from Portland, did the same thing. I think it'd be a fun game, but very challenging. So, do you like to write about other winds?
Worked on one.
Awesome, good. I feel like we need stories that are about totally wild worlds because they help us think more creatively about this one. So, cool.
This is something I wanted to ask you since before I even knew you. When I read Wild and Distant Seas, and I feel like that novel is such a feminist novel to me.
Thank you.
And I absolutely love it. And I think of myself as a feminist, and I do 19th century American studies, and Moby Dick is one of my absolute favorite books of all time. And that is a problem for some of my feminist scholars. They just can't reconcile that.
Yeah.
And to me, I think there's a logic as to, why someone would read Moby Dick and then write the book then.
Yeah.
But I just wonder if you have encountered that, or if you ever feel like you need to defend the fact that you start with Melville and project like this.
I will say I'm not the first person who had that idea. There is several. Now there's 2 more recently that have come out that are feminist retellings of Moby Dick. One in space. I can't remember. It's called Hell's Heart from Hell's Heart. I stab at the line. And then the one that came out, I think 20 years before mine, was called Ahab's Wife, which I still haven't read because I didn't want to read it while I was writing this in October or something late weekend. But I think because there is so many big feelings about Melville, the thing that scared me most is that one of the Melville scholars was going to call me up and be like, "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing? Here's all the things you got wrong." I was very lucky that my professor who taught me who taught Moby Dick was Zach Turpin at the University of Idaho, who was a delight and who said because I went and told him before we read it. Actually, I was like, "Listen, I'm very busy. I'm not sure I can read this book right now." And he's like, "Just trust me." He said it's very funny and very weird. He'll like it, and that's exactly what I loved about it. But I think, part of why I attached myself to that character, there are technically 2 women who speak, but one of them is her sidekick, Betty, who says, one thing, was that absence of women in the book. And I know, I think you can see it's mostly men on ships. There weren't a lot of women on ships at the time, but that was the thing that just kept, eating at me. And that there are other women who are mentioned, but given no more than a sentence. And there is, what's her Aunt Charity, but she doesn't talk. She spends a whole chapter. She doesn't get to say a word. And so definitely there was that feminist impulse in me that didn't want to challenge Melville, but wanted to add to the conversation. Which was intimidating in its own way, but it was also such a fun, it was a fun game as a writer. It was fun. Part of why I attached to that part is I advised the student newspaper and magazine and radio station at the University of Iowa at the time, and I was teaching, and I was spending a lot of time around like young men who were like adorable but so clueless all the time. And I liked the scene in Moby Dick between Evangeline, is what I named her, between Mrs. Hussey, who's the innkeeper, and Ishmael. Ishmael tells in this very authoritative voice. And what I kind of got stuck on is, well, what if he's like wildly misunderstanding the situation here? What if he is being a 20-year-old boy who thinks he knows how the world works, but this is an actual woman that he is dealing with who has a wildly different perspective? And my apologies to any 20-year-old men in the room, you're wonderful. But you know, we all miss things about the world when we're young. And so that, to me, was a big question I wanted to answer, is not, you know, saying here's everything wrong with Melville, but like here's maybe something Melville didn't think about. Here's something, I mean, Melville's wife did a lot of work for him, so he was at least around women, but not a perspective he would have had, but one that I can bring. So, yeah.
Any others?
Okay, yes, Vanessa.
Your writing has a lot of very intimate and precise details, and I was wondering if that's something that comes naturally to you, or if it's something you work out and have to process.
I mean, I'd like to say it's just like all me, but some of it is like I'm a very naturally curious person. I was a journalist for a while for a reason. I like to be all up in everyone's business all the time and know all the things. But some of it is also something. I think when I was a freshman in college, I read Henry James for the first time, and he has a quote that's "Be someone on whom nothing is lost," and that became like my motto for that part of my life. Where I want to pay attention to the world. I want to gather every little weird thing I can and save it up for something for somewhere. And then I we all have this magic ability to add imaginary details to the details of the world. And so it is something that, you know, I fight with my tendency to be on my phone and to be a space cadet. And I try to spend time in the world paying attention, because I think that's important for anyone to do, but especially important for artists to do.
Bingo. You finish it?
We can call it good. We're in the front, that's fine. And Pete's pay. Thank you all so much.
Bingo. Please touch.